Welcome to the podcast, Let the Prophet Speak. Today we are going to study the prophet Jeremiah, Yirmiyahu, 25b, the second half of chapter 25. In the first half of chapter 25, we discussed the cycle of violence, the cycle of crime and punishment of nations, so to speak. The nations that come and destroy Israel, but do it in a cruel and merciless way, will eventually suffer the same fate themselves. And we mentioned before, no one can ever give the excuse and say, well, the fact that I was strong, the fact that I was able to do it must mean that God wants me to do it, and therefore it's okay to act this way. That kind of excuse can never work. We're going to continue studying that and seeing that now. I just want to remind you for a minute, that verse 13 of Jeremiah 25, we mentioned how Yirmiyahu, Asher Niba Yirmiyahu, that Yirmiyahu prophesied Al Kol HaGoyim, regarding all of the nations, which reminds us again in what we learned in the beginning of Jeremiah, how God said in Jeremiah 1, he said that I'm going to make you a prophet to all of the nations. The point being that, of course, Jeremiah was in Judah and was in Jerusalem, and of course he was saying prophecies to the people of Judah, but his message was directed to the entire world. The purpose of teaching the people of Judah to act properly and to live just moral lives was in order that all the other nations around them should learn that lesson from them. The other nations around them, when they saw the punishment of Judah, also should have learned the lesson from them. They should have learned how to that God will eventually punish them for their misdeeds. So the fact that they didn't learn this lesson was therefore a reason to punish them as well. And remember that the message of Jeremiah was not meant, and this has been said repeatedly so far, and we'll see it again throughout this book and many other times, that the purpose of teaching the people of Judah is in order that they should then go and teach the rest of the world. This is the message that we've seen repeated throughout all of the words of the prophets in Isaiah and many of the others as well, and we see it again here repeated in Jeremiah. And now, therefore, with this understanding, we can, we can now go ahead and look at and start reading the second half of this chapter. I'm going to start from verse 15. Because so God said to me. Jeremiah is now speaking of the vision that God told him and what he is supposed to say in his prophecy to the world. Kach, God told me to do as follows: take et kos hayayin hachema hazos miadi, this cup that is full of the wine of fury, a wine of wrath, this that I'm holding, take it out of my hand. If I wanted to remind you from Isaiah 34, verse 5, Ki rivso b'shamayim, when God talked about his drunken sword of wrath, of anger against the sinners of Edom. This is the idea of God's wine of wrath. Wine makes people irrational. It makes people just if someone is angry and they're drunk, their anger can be. God is comparing that kind of anger which doesn't seem to discriminate. It's just total wrath. V'hishkisa also, and I want you to take that cup and give it to drink, eskol hagayim, to all of the nations, asher anochi sholeach oscha alehem, all of the nations that I am sending you to them, because God again is emphasizing, I am sending you not just to the people. He said, Jeremiah referred to God as Elokei Yisrael, the God of Israel, but what God said is, I am sending you to all of the nations, not just Israel. I'm sending you to everyone. V'shasu v'hitgoashu v'hitolalu, and I want them to drink this wine of wrath, and they will vomit, and they will be crazy. They'll act in a crazy way because of the sword against this image that we saw that I mentioned, that we saw in Isaiah, the same image of a drunken sword of God. What I remember Isaiah 34, that I am sending that drunken sword of wrath and punishment throughout those nations. So therefore, Jeremiah says, I took that kos, that wrath, and I gave it. He's still speaking of the image that he has in his mind. This is in his dream. He took that drink, and I went and I gave it to drink to all of the nations, all those nations that God sent me to, those nations to bring this message. First, though, where did it start? Verse 18, at Yerushalayim et Yehuda. First, I gave that to drink to Jerusalem and to all of the cities of the Judah, viet Melacheha, and to her kings, viet Soreha, and to her officers, to the nobles. And we'll see again when we mention the other nations how he's going to zero in on the leadership. Laseit osam l'chorba. I gave it first to the people of Jerusalem and the people of Judah and to the kings and to the leaders of Judah who led the people astray. And I gave them to drink this wrath, l'chorba, in order to that it should result in its destruction, l'shama, in its complete desolation, l'shreika, a place that people will hiss at and make fun of, l'klala, and curse, kayom hazeh, like I see this day. When it says this day, the commentaries, Radak and Rashi, explain that kayom hazeh means because Jeremiah is actually writing down his book after the destruction of Jerusalem took place, even though he's saying this prophecy before the destruction. Another way I think that you can explain this, when he says, like this day, meaning this day that I'm seeing in my vision. I'm seeing this destruction in my vision, like I see now. Because you remember, he's still talking about his vision. And then what did I do? Then I went to the Jews' closest allies, the ones that should have learned the lesson from the destruction of Jerusalem and changed their ways. Who was the closest allies? We've seen repeatedly the land of Egypt. So the next thing I did, verse 19, I went to Paro Melech Mitzrayim. I went to Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, Viet Avadav and his servant, Viet Sarav and his officers, Viet Kol Hamo, and then to his entire nation. And then what did I do? Then I started going out to the other countries that are close by to Israel. It's called Ha'erev, the entire, the lands of Arabia. It's called Eretz Ha'utz, in the land of Uz. It's called Malchi Eretz Pelishtim, in the lands of the Philistines. Viet Ashkelon, Viet Azov, Viet Ekron. These are cities of the Philistines. Viet She'eret Ashdod, and the remnants, whatever's left of Ashdod. And then I started moving out farther. At Edom to Edom, Viet Moab, and Moab, Viet Bnei Ammon, and the sons of Ammon. And then I moved a little farther north, Viet Kol Machet Tzor, the kings of Tyre, Viet Kol Machet Sidon, and the kings of Sidon. These are in modern-day Lebanon, a little bit farther north. And Viet Malchei Ha'i, and those are the kings of the faraway places, the Asher Be'evar Hayam, the islands that are all the way on the other sides of the sea, those places which they should have learned this, out of whether that's referring to Cyprus or other islands in the Mediterranean that are far out there, or just places that you would travel to by sea. But again, the idea being the people that were closest to Jerusalem should have learned the lesson first, but even the people that are farther should have learned the lesson from the destruction. And then even farther away places, Viet Didon, Viet Tema, Viet Buz, this is verse 23, Viet Kol Kitzusei Feah, and all of those people who cut the corners of their hair. This is like a custom that in these faraway lands they used to do. They would cut their hairs. Exactly what these locations are is not really that important. It's just we're going to farther away places. The commentaries and the scholars debate exactly which locations these refer to. Again, verse 24, Viet Kol Malchei Arav, and all of the kings of the faraway Arabian lands, Viet Kol Malchei Ha'erev, and all of the people that are out there in the desert, Hashochnim Bamidbar, all the kings of the nomads that wander through the desert, Viet Kol Malchei Zimri, and all of the kings of Zimri, Viet Kol Malchei Elam, Viet Kol Malchei Modai. Again, Viet Kol Malchei Tzafon, this is verse 26, and the kings of the northern countries, Hakrovim v'Archokim, the ones that are close to us first, v'Archokim, and the ones that are far away from us. Ish el achiv, each one together with the others. Viet Kol Hamamlachos, and all of the kingdoms haaretz of the world, asher al panei adama, everything on the face of the earth, umelech Sheshach, and the king of Babylon himself. Sheshach is generally translated as Babylon. The Babylonian kings had sometimes that a form of that word Sheshach in their names. Also, it is pointed out that by the system of Atbash, which is the system of using the Hebrew alphabet, where the first letter matches the last letter and the second letter matches the second to last letter, and so on. Sheshach would spell out Babylon. The shin would be a bet, and the chaf would be a lamed, so it would spell out Babylon. That's what the commentaries explain. Yishtach arehem, he will drink at the end. Why? How does that work? Because remember, the destruction that will be wrought upon all these kingdoms will be because of Babylon conquering all of them. And then once all that destruction is wrought and Babylon has conquered all of these peoples, eventually the king of Babylon himself, because of all of that he did, will be the one who suffers. If just remember the importance we studied in Isaiah 13, who also mentioned how Babylon, because of how she subjugated all the other nations around her, she ends up being destroyed herself. And we also had that in the beginning of this very chapter as well. So then, now that we listed all these places, verse 27, V'yomarta aleim, I want you to speak to them. When you speak to them, when you speak to these nations, this is the message I would like for you to give them. So says God, the Lord of hosts, who is the God of Israel. The world knows who I am. I am the God of Israel, and I want you to tell them in my name that you, shesu v'shechru'u kiyu, drink this drink of anger, get drunk on it, and vomit v'niflu, and you will fall v'lo takumu, and you will not arise, mipnei achereb, because of the sword asher anochi sholech b'nechem, because of the sword that I am going to send against you. And what's going to happen? They're going to say, we don't want to drink. We don't want it. This is verse 28. And it will be when they refuse to drink the cup of anger that I am from your hand, that you're giving them to drink. You will say, so says God, you have to drink. It's not up to you. You can't choose and say, oh, well, we don't worship that God. We worship another God. That's not how it works. God that is the Elokei Yisrael, the God of Israel, is the God of everyone, the God of justice. True justice is going to come to everyone. You can't just decide, I'm not going to drink that cup because that's not our God. But no, because that city which I called my name upon, the city of Jerusalem that I made my capital, the one from which you were supposed to learn the lessons of how to live, the good lessons, and they themselves didn't. That's why I'm starting there. That's why Anochi Mechel Hara. That's why I am going to begin to the punishment from Jerusalem. And you think that you're going to get away clean? You think you're going to get away just because you're not there, because you're not in the city that I called my city? That's not how it works. Lo tinaku, you're not going to get away clean. Because I'm going to bring my sword and call out my sword. I'll call Yoshvei Aretz on all of the residents of earth, all of the residents of the land. So says God. My justice is not only against those people that call themselves my people. My justice is against all people, because I am the God of all. And I want you to say prophecy regarding them. This is verse 38. All of these things that I just told you, this is the message I want you to say. And continue as follows. Say to them as follows. Adonai, God mimarom yishag. God calls out from on high, from up above. God is not resident only in this city or only in that city or only in that country. He's from up above, and he looks out on all of us. It's from his holy residence. That's where his voice comes from. So his voice reaches everywhere. He roars loudly upon his entire residence, which is everywhere. Heidad ki dorchim ya'aneh. Dorchim, this is like the sound of when people are stamping on the wine presses, and they all calling out, and the person is calling out instructions, and they would like kind of chant together loudly. It's an image of a loud chant that covers a large area. That's El Kol Yoshvei Aretz. God calls out this chant against or towards all of the residents of the land, everyone. Ba sha'on ad kitzei haaretz. This sha'on, this tumultuousness, this storm is going to come to all the corners of the land, no matter how far it is, everywhere. Because God has a problem, God has an issue with all of the nations. Nishpatu l'chol basar. God brings His justice to all flesh, all living flesh, the whole basar, all living flesh, all human beings. The whole basar would even mean non-human beings. Everything. God's judgment applies to harishaim, those that are evil. Nisanam lacherev. God is going to ultimately destroy them by sword. And Oma Adonai, so says God. Now we're up to verse 32. Why does this all happen? Vayu chalalei Adonai bayomahu. It will be that those that on that day. I'm sorry, I missed the verse. Verse 32, I skipped. Let's go back. Ko amar Adonai tzvaos. So says God, the Lord of hosts. Hinei ra'ah yotzeis. This evil is coming out. Migoy el goy. Now I've seen several different translations of this verse. I'm going to tell you the way I see this translation. Why is this? Hinei ra'ah yotzeis. Behold, this evil is coming against you. Because some see this as meaning from nation to nation, which would mean this evil is coming by nations attacking each other. That is how this is going to manifest itself, this destruction. I'm thinking of this because of Gai El Gai, because of what one nation, right, did to the other nation. This is the reason why. Because each nation attacked the other nation, this is the reason why I'm punishing you. Because you can't get along. Because you constantly fight. That is why this ra'ah is coming out. Visar gadol, and this huge storm, ye'or miyar kse'or, is going to be awakened, and I've seen its translation, unleashed, or aroused from the corners of the earth. This is verse 33, and those that are slain by God on that day will fill up the world. It's from one corner of the land to the other. There will be so much death that no one will have time to eulogize. They will not gather the dead. They will not have a chance to be buried. They will become just refuse, just junk all across the face of the earth. That's what because people could not get along, because people were constantly waging war. Helilu haroim, and now God turns to the leadership. How did the entire world become so corrupt? Because of the leadership, and because the leadership were led selfishly rather than lead the people towards peace. War helped the selfish leadership. So let's read verse 34. Helilu haroim, cry out, you who are the shepherds. The shepherds are always referring to those that are the leaders. Vizaku, cry out. Vihit palshu, and cover yourselves with dirt and mud. Adir hatzon, you who were the leaders of the sheep, the ones who were supposed to lead them properly. The day of your slaughter has come. Your time is up. Utefutso sichem, and the day of your smashing, of your being scattered into bits. And you will fall like a precious glass vessel will fall and just shatter. That's your time has come. Because there will no longer be a place where usually the wealthy, the rich, the powerful, they have a place to run, they have a place to hide when the enemy comes, but there won't be any place for you to hide anymore. You who are supposed to be leading the sheep, you will have no more place to escape to. Kol tza'akas haroim, the sound of the screaming and crying of the leaders. V'lilas adirei atzon, and the cry of those that were supposed to be leading the sheep. Listen to that terrible cry. Ki shoded Adonai et marisam. God is now taking away the people that they were supposed to shepherd. They benefited off the backs of the sheep that they were supposed to lead. God is now taking those sheep away from them. Those sheep are going back to God. the leaders will have no more sheep to take advantage of. V'nadamu na'ota shalom. Those pastures, those peaceful pastures that they used for their own benefit so much, will cease to exist. The leaders, the corrupt leaders that became wealthy off the backs of the people, off the backs of the masses, that used them as their own pasture, that pasture will be, like we said at the end of verse 36, will be taken away by God, and the leaders will have no place to escape, no place to run, and they will shatter like a glass vessel falling off the table, because of the fierce and harsh anger of God. Because Azav Kafir Sukkot, God has left, like a young lion has left his hiding place. Sukkot is the place in the grass where the lion was hiding in ambush and waiting, and people were peacefully walking by as if there was nothing there, and suddenly, with a rush, with a jump, God has come out of that of that hiding and has wrought destruction. Some look at this as Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, has come out of his hiding place to destroy. But many of the commentaries, and I'm going to read it this way, Radak, Rashi, and others read it as God has left his hiding place. Their land, the land of all of these nations, has now become destroyed. Because of the anger of the Yonah. The Yonah, Rashi brings two translations, and the other commentaries all kind of pick one of them. Rashi's one translation is Yonah from the language of yayin, of wine. This anger, the wrath of wine, which we had been discussing. It would fit the context of this chapter, because God described his anger as the anger of a drunken, angry person. It could also mean Yonah from a language of ona'ah, from oppression. The oppressive anger that came to oppress and destroy the people. And most of the commentaries go with the second one. I think either translation is you can understand what the point of the verse is. Because of the tremendous, fierce anger of God, the people have now suffered this destruction. I know this was a lot of destruction happening. But there are some really important lessons here. The lesson and the idea that the destruction of one people should teach a lesson to the others to stop the destruction, to stop the war. But instead they went and fought more. And then because of the lack of cooperation between nations, because each nation answered war with another war, and answered war with more revenge, and answered destruction with more destruction, therefore God ultimately metes out the ultimate destruction of them all. And the cycle of violence, unfortunately, because of the way people act, continues. And that this lesson is universal. It wasn't meant for just Jerusalem. This lesson is meant for all the nations of the entire world. Like Jeremiah said, Miksei Aretz ad Ksei Aretz, from one corner of the planet to the other corner. Thank you so much for studying chapter 25. Looking forward to studying future chapters together.